We bailed out, we printed 300 billion new dollars to bail out the Silicon Valley Bank. And we topped off the Ukraine war commitment to 113 billion. So we got lots of money for the military industrial complex, lots of money for the bankers, the banksters. But we're starving Americans to death. Starving them. And because of all the inflation, we spent $16 trillion on the lockdown. We wasted, got nothing for it. $8 trillion on the Ukraine war. That's $24 trillion that they had to print to pay for nothing. That money, the way they're paying it back, they're not going to tell us they're raised taxes because you can't do that. It's a hidden tax called inflation, and it hits the poor and the middle class, and it has dismantled the middle class in this country. Well, my friends, food bills for basic foods like chicken, dairy, and eggs has increased 76% in 2 years to pay for the Iraq war, the Ukraine war, the Iraq war, and the lockdowns. His food prices are going up. And now the government's telling him, while we have plenty of money for the military and the banks, we don't have it for Americans who are, hardworking people. And, something is not right. We're in a crisis in this country. And we need to start unraveling the empire. We have 800 bases abroad. We were told in 1992, when the Soviet Union collapsed, we were told we were going to get a peace dividend, that the military expenditure was going to go from $600 billion a year to $200 billion, and we were going to stop making billion-dollar stealth bombers that can't fly in the rain, and that we're going to take that money home and build schools with it and build infrastructure and give good health care in the inner cities. And then none of that happened. And today, instead of going down to $200 billion, it's gone up. The total military expenditure, if you include national security, is $1.3 billion. And it hasn't made us safer. It's made us worse off.
1.3 trillion?
1.3 trillion. If you include...
Yeah, I think you said billion.
No, 1.3 trillion. If you include national, the security apparatus and, all the stuff that you have to walk through at the airports. And if you include the $300 billion to the veterans, which you can't cut. The veterans are, we have 29 a day killing themselves. These wars are not good for our country or our kids, and we need to stop being an empire and instead come home, rebuild the middle class, and then project economic power the way the Chinese do, who are eating our lunch because they know not to project military power, to project economic power. That's how you win the hearts and minds of the world and national security. My uncle, John Kennedy, did that. He refused to go to war. So he was surrounded by military-industrial complex and he learned very early and an intelligence apparatus that he realized early on that the purpose of the CIA and the intelligence apparatus was to create a constant pipeline of new wars for the military-industrial complex. 3 days before he took the oath of office, Eisenhower, who was the outgoing president, gave what is probably the most important speech in American history, which was, where he warned against the military-industrial complex. I was at my uncle's inauguration. I was in Washington that day. I was a 6-year-old boy, and I was sitting on the stands behind him in front of him during his inauguration. And he understood that. And 2 months later, the military and intelligence came to him and said, "We got to invade Cuba." And he was like, "I'm not going to Cuba, and I'm not going to let the military." And they said, "Well, we got all these Cubans trained, and they're going to go attack Castro." And he said, "Well, we can't. The U.S. government can't be doing that. We can't be attacking. I don't like what Castro's doing down there, but it's not the United States' job to dictate what kind of governments other countries have." And they said, well, as soon as they land, there's going to be a big revolution. Everybody's going to rise up and they're going to overthrow Castro. And he said, well, you can't use the U.S. military. And they ended up bringing those guys over with United Fruit boats. And in the middle of it, in the night, they came to him and said, they're getting wiped out on the beach and you need to send in the military and invade. And he said, We're not going to do it. And he stepped out of that meeting, and he realized they had been lying to him and trying to trick him. And he said, I want to take the CIA and shatter it into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the winds. And then, for the next 1,000 days of his presidency, he was at war with his military and intelligence apparatus. They tried to get him to go into Laos. He said no. They tried to get him to go into Vietnam with combat troops. They said that we need 250,000 combat troops. He refused. Everybody around him wanted him to go into Vietnam. He sent 16,000 military advisors. That's fewer people than he sent to get James Meredith into Ole Miss in Jackson, Mississippi, to get one black man into school. He sent fewer in Vietnam. They weren't allowed to fight. Many of them did. They violated the rules of engagement. In October of 1963, he heard that some of his Green Berets had been killed over there. And he said, I want a total casualty list from Vietnam. And his aide came to him and said, 75 Americans have died. He said, that's too many. And he signed that day a national security order ordering all troops out of Vietnam, U.S. troops. The first 1,000 over the next month, and then the rest by the beginning of 1965. And then a month later, he was killed. So, but what his view was is that he believed that the view of Americans abroad should not be, a soldier with a gun. It should be a Peace Corps volunteer building, wells, and it should be USAID helping poor people, and it should be Alliance for Progress building middle class. And that's what he did. And he just started the Kennedy Milk Program to give nutrition to poor kids all over the world. As a result of that, in Africa today, there are more statues to John Kennedy, more boulevards named after him, more hospitals, schools, universities, avenues in all the major cities named after him than any other president.